So summer of fun is what we're in right now.
Summer of fun!
Summer of fun! And this is where, during this time of the year, we're trying to find stuff to have fun with, right?
Yep.
I would say this summer so far, tough summer. Like,
cruel. Would you say it's a cruel
summer? I would say it's a cruel summer.
All right.
I think right now it's hard. Like, being excited about technology is a little bit tougher right now because there's so many things to drag. Well, at least I find this that can drag me down. Like, while I enjoy talking about Epic and Apple, I would prefer that not to happen, right? Like, I find it interesting because it's happened, but my choice would be that didn't happen, right? And I like covering these things on the show because if it's important, I want to cover it, right? Like, if it's important to the landscape of Apple and how it shifts, I want to cover it. This is the same with Apple Intelligence, right? Where we were spending so much time talking about things like image playgrounds. I wish they wouldn't have done that. But if they're going to do it, I want to talk about it because I want to understand it with you and I want to talk about the ramifications of it. But I just think right now, all of these things that are happening makes covering technology just more tiring, whether it's us having to understand things to talk about them, whether we like them or not, to then also having spoken about them opens the door to all kinds of feedback from listeners, which understandably a lot of the time is not really directed at us, but they're sharing frustrations that they have with certain things. Yeah. And so as I was putting the document together today, and I was actually feeling a little bit of this, I was feeling a bit like, oof, I don't know how I feel about what's going on right now. I kind of wanted to understand from you if you have any thoughts about how you stay excited and enthusiastic about technology at times where news is low or where it drags you down. I kind of want to talk about that today a little bit.
Okay. I don't know. Do I have a pep talk? I don't know. But
you don't have to have a pep talk. But like, or at least what do you think about this idea? Do you feel like you're being dragged a little bit? Because I do.
Yeah, I mean, none of us, I think, and neither of us for sure, got into this because what we really wanted to do was talk about AI being potentially putting people out of work, potentially being trained on people's work without their permission, which is how it's basically gone. To talk about government regulation. Like, if I could encapsulate it, I would say, as a kid, I loved computers. And when we got the newspaper, the last section I would ever choose to read was the business section. I think that's sort of what I'm getting at, is I have an enthusiasm for technology. I don't have the enthusiasm, I'll put it this way, the enthusiasm does not stem from a lot of the places where we end up having to talk about it, right? That's not where my initial enthusiasm came from, right? As a kid, I wasn't like, oh boy, I can't wait to grow up and think about government regulation of technology companies and legislation and lawsuits and tech companies that might be out of control and ripping people off and potentially leading to the loss of lots of jobs and a very strange, impact on the world economy. Like, these are not why I'm interested in this stuff. So I guess but it's part of my job, right? And the job is not doing just fun stuff. I mean, like, I make those charts and we talk about it and it's fun and all that. But like, every time we do Apple quarterly earnings, August 1st, by the way, is the date this year or this quarter. So get ready. It'll be, just in time for me to be back from my trip to cover that. But like, every time I do that, and it's money and charts and stuff like that, I think, it's that business section of the newspaper that I didn't even read, and here I am in it. And it's like, it's been part of my profession. Like, part of my profession is to understand Apple's business and why they do what they do. But like, are financial results something that I have fundamental kind of enthusiasm for? They aren't. Like, the stuff that keeps the pilot light lit, that keeps the flame burning, is that there are so many different ways that technology impacts my life and other people's life in a fun way. And that could be as simple as I have a new nephew and the family chat iMessage thread is just full of pictures of this little baby and of his of my niece, his big sister, who's learning to adapt to having a younger sibling, which is exactly the dynamic that my kids had. That is, and then I can just drag and drop out of that to my mom, who wants to see pictures of the baby, other side of the family, so not related. So but she wants to see, because who doesn't want to see pictures of the baby? So I think about stuff like that. I think about having fun on the 4th of July, doing something as dumb as updating my JavaScript widget so that when my phone is in the kitchen in standby, it has the right temperature on it, and getting excited about talking to you about that weather station. And like, there's lots of cool stuff in terms of customizing what you do, and amazing that we have supercomputers in our pockets and all of that, that it still feels like the future. It still feels like that we live in an amazing time with all this amazing capability. I can't pretend and ignore all of the downsides, and I think they're important. I mean, I read a lot of science fiction, and let me tell you, science fiction is not generally PR for the tech industry, right? Like, science fiction has been and continues to be often extremely critical, extremely wary, extremely interested in talking about the cultural ramifications of technology in a way that I think tech companies, and the social and political ramifications of technology, in ways that tech companies are super not interested in thinking about, right? Because it gets in the, like, no, I just build it. I don't want to think about what it leads to because I have stock options, right? That's a lot of what's going on there. So I don't know. It's a mix. I just, when it's stuff that is getting me down, I try to also think about the stuff that is positive, because I can usually find positive amidst the negative. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a million miles away from where I am too. I think I care a little bit more about the business side of technology than you do, but it isn't why where my love comes from, right?
Yes.
It's similar, right? Where it's like, the thing that excites me is, I like, technology is a toy for me, like it kind of always has been. And even though I use the same technology to do lots of things, I also like to play with the technology. And I would say maybe over the last 5 years or so, I've been finding new ways of doing that too, right? Where if it comes from like learning and building keyboards and learning like some of the electronics that go into that. And recently I've been getting a bit more interested in like the retro gaming handhelds and stuff, and all of the ridiculous work required to try and get emulators running on them and things like that, like and understanding what that might lead to. It's like, I've been trying to find these little hobby projects for me, which are just pure because I love the technology, but it all is similar to like, I want to try this new app, or I want to be on this beta to see what this is about, and da da da. But the problem, I think, is that as we're getting further and further along, we are brushing up more and more with the science fiction of it all, and it just means that the toys become there are more health warning with the toys, right? And then we have to consider that stuff more, and because of where we are in this whole thing, we find ourselves talking about it more, and then like with everything is just more political than it used to be. So everyone, you got to pick your side, and it just becomes like a whole thing. And it, it can be tiring sometimes, I think, to focus on this stuff in the way that we do. I just think right now it's just particularly difficult. I'm finding it particularly difficult right now, right? Where like I'm wading into these huge topics, like about like what AI is, whether I like it or not, and I find it interesting to talk about, but it's also just very emotionally draining in a way that technology usually is exciting for me, right? Rather than, and like my emotions are being buoyed by technology rather than being drained by technology. Do you kind of follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's hard when you've got a hot button issue that is an issue that you need to talk about, because a really hot button issue, something like AI, the problem is that talking about it, like, it engenders so much feeling from people on all sides of the issue. And there's more than two sides with AI. And it can get really difficult really fast. And having difficult conversations is not bad. In fact, for podcasting, I think it can be very good. But having difficult conversations, good, healthy. Do they lead to good vibes? Maybe not. Sometimes you want good vibes, and that's just life, right? Sometimes, and if talking about technology is a place that maybe gives you good vibes, having the other difficult kinds of talks about technology are, not giving you those good vibes necessarily. And it's a natural reaction. You and I have had, if you go back a few years, we have had topics where we've talked on Sunday and said, basically, I guess we got to talk about it. And we do. And often those are good conversations and they're good episodes. And the people in the Discord are like, I really appreciate that. And we get feedback later saying that was a really good conversation. And it's true. And I can even be proud of how that conversation went. But at the same time, on Sunday, we were like, we don't want to do this, but we have to. It's our responsibility. Yeah. And then as we're doing it, I feel unpleasant, right? I feel like, I don't love talking about this, but we need to do the work and we need to talk about it. And afterward, I feel more relieved that it's over than proud of what we've done. Sometimes both, but really it's just like, I'm glad we got through that and survived it. And I think that's some of this, right? Which is, you could do that, but I don't want, Myke, if everything we talked about had that weight on it, I wouldn't want to do podcasts anymore, right? I just wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah, if every episode was this. Yeah.
Let me tell you, there was a podcast called Download that Stephen Hackett and I did.
Yeah.
And it was our attempt to do a more general tech podcast. And what ended up happening was that it became because of when we were doing it, it became the weekly, all of the terrible ways that Facebook is ruining humanity podcast, essentially. Yep. And we couldn't dodge it. It was the tech story of that period. And you know what happened to Download is we stopped doing it because it was so unpleasant to talk about those topics. And they didn't bring us joy. And we created a topic that people did love called the Fuzzy Puppy Update that we did at the end of that podcast, literally because we felt like the show was so dark that we needed to cheer people up and cheer ourselves up when we were done. I'm like, man, I just can't. There's serious stuff that we have to talk about, but if everything was like that, this is not what I got into this to do. It would just be, I would try to find something else to do with my life.
Yeah, I think maybe my particular issue is I have 3 shows that are talking about these topics right now.
You do.
And that might be too many for one person.
Yeah.
Usually it's great. Having 3 places where I can talk about tangentially related stuff or similar stuff, but with different people in different ways. I love it. And I think even now, what we're doing right now, I'm still having these conversations in very different ways on the different shows, but it might be a lot for just one man. I am but one man, Jason Snell.
I agree.
And so, I don't know. This is the cruel summer that we're in, I suppose, and it's just a case of pushing through it. But then when I hear things like spring of 2025, I'm like, Jesus, please just launch it, so I don't have to keep speculating about the launching of the. You know what I mean? Just get it out there, then we can understand it, deal with it, and move on. It's the not knowing is the part that's frustrating for me right now. Maybe
I want to recommend to people who haven't heard it last week's episode of Connected, episode 509. It's just you and Federico. Federico has lots of thoughts about AI, but what I liked about it, and I don't agree. I mean, this is the challenge, right? It's also not fun. Let's just say it. It's also not fun when one of your friends is extremely passionate about an issue and you don't entirely agree with them, right? I don't entirely disagree with him either, but my take on it is not quite his. And that can be awkward, right? That can be awkward and difficult. I thought you did a good job in that episode of saying, letting him say what he wanted to say and saying, I see where you're coming from. I don't entirely agree or disagree with it. But what I liked about that episode is he got to elaborate very clearly some of his concerns about AI. And it's not, if you sort of pegged Federico as the guy who's angry that models were trained on his content, that's not what most of that episode is about. Mm-hmm. It's actually or at least the core of it. It's actually more about a concern about how AI is used and is going to be used, and how it is, in Federico's opinion, I think fundamentally it has the potential to be frequently misused in a way that is fundamentally dehumanizing. And it's a big issue, and it's complicated. And what I found valuable in that is that I really liked hearing somebody who could walk me through his entire perspective on it, even if there were points that I didn't agree with, because it was really good to think about it. Was it summer fun, good vibes? No, sir, it was not. But I really liked it, and I appreciated all of it this is a callback to our follow-up, while I was power washing my outdoor table. I was thinking deep thoughts about AI with Federico Vitici while also power washing my patio. So
yeah, I mean, I
people should
feel
listen.
like, ostensibly, what I am doing as a career, which I am thrilled that I get to do, is to entertain people, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that is ostensibly what I do. It can be, I think it is harder to entertain people with topics like this. Now, I think that episode of Connected was very entertaining in an interesting way, but I find it harder to produce something that I think is entertaining, like emotionally harder, when it's about such a difficult topic. I find it way easier to crack jokes, right?
Of course.
With my friends.
Sure.
And have a good time.
And like I was saying about our difficult topics, it can't always be that, right? We do have to buckle down and do those difficult topics and say, we have to talk about this. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't, I'm not interested in doing a podcast that's entirely unmoored from anything and is just in jokes and wackiness and all of that. Like everything, and there's a spectrum. There's a scale there. There's a spectrum that podcasts can run on. I wouldn't want it to be dead serious all the time, but I also wouldn't want it to be entirely weightless all the time, right? Like the world is mixed and we need to be mixed. But you're right. The difficult stuff, even if it's necessary and good to talk about it, is still difficult, and it doesn't spark the kind of joy that the fun stuff does.
Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to talk about this a little bit today. This wouldn't really go anywhere other than the fact of just like lifting the lid of my brain a little bit and letting people look inside. Mm-hmm. Like, this is kind of where I am right now, and it's interesting. I am very aware of the fact that I am running on fumes at the moment because we're entertaining over 1,000 people in like 2 weeks. So I may be running a little raw at the moment, which might be why I'm feeling this way today. So thank you for indulging me.
Sure, of course.